Hello and welcome back to my channel. My name is SewRena, and in today's video we're going to be sewing up a heavily embroidered garment. And by heavily embroidered, I do mean over 10 plus hours of machine embroidery to recreate a fabric that I saw on an outfit on Pinterest. I tried to find this fabric that I fell in love with on Pinterest, and I just could not find anything that was made out of a natural material. I think I found it and it was in the UK and made of polyester. I'm not sure, but I found it, and for whatever reason it didn't work out, so I decided I was going to go for gold and try to embroider out this lobster fabric myself. And instead of making a full-on recreation of the original fabric, which I would not be able to do anyway, I decided to go with a more toile fabric, and I am so happy with how it turned out. So if you're interested in seeing how I recreate this fabric and what I do with it, go ahead and like and subscribe. Now let's get into the pattern that I will be using to make my outfit. For today's pattern, we're going to be sewing Simplicity 1651. It is a dress pattern with a faux button placket down the center front on one of the views, a cummerbund, and a jacket. For the fabric, I'll be using 100% cotton 2-yard pre-cuts. I use my Janome to embroider the lobsters, and I alternate the directions the lobsters are in and stagger the placement. I do this to avoid having a directional print. And because I'm eyeballing the placement, it's a great way to avoid too much uniformity. I embroider about 2.5 yards of fabric continuously, with each lobster taking about 36 minutes each. This totaled to about 40 individual lobsters. My original plan for this garment was to make a full skirted dress with a high collar. In fact, I did make this dress already, so I'm going to pop in a photo of the pattern I meant. I wanted to make this dress, and that's why I had a little bit of pre-cuts left over. The only thing that stopped me from doing that was the cost of the embroidery floss. After about 4 or 5 cones of embroidery floss, it was really starting to add up, and I figured I needed to stop there because this dress was getting pretty expensive. I didn't properly plan this project out for a couple of reasons. One, as soon as I thought of it, I wanted to act on it. That's how I ended up with pre-cuts in the first place. 2, although I've been using my embroidery machine for a year, I haven't made really large embroidery projects, so I underestimated how much thread it would take to complete this. And last but certainly not least, I didn't know how much the larger cones of embroidery thread cost, and I definitely thought they were going to go further. So therefore, I just came into this very underprepared, expecting to spend a lot less than I actually ended up spending, so I did have to cap it off. I do foresee myself doing something very similar, possibly with crabs in the future, making that full dress, because now that I've made this one, I know I want a full dress even more, so I'll just plan accordingly for the future. Now I want to discuss my pattern choice a little bit, both for the full dress as well as this slender, more slim fit wiggle dress. I wanted to go with something very simple because I knew that all of the detail and drama was going to be in the embroidery. It's also very clear from the inspiration photos that I found on Pinterest that that garment was also made with the lobsters in mind. So very simple pant, very simple like vest, so that the cut of the garment isn't competing with the bold print. With this dress design, the darts are out of the way, closer to the side seams going up in a diagonal. It doesn't have sleeves, so it's not really cutting that off. And the only major seam is the waist seam, which is going to be covered with a belt or a cummerbund. So most of my lobsters remain whole, and this is really important just because I did put in so much time and effort into embroidering all of these on there, so I want to preserve as much of the embroidery as possible, whereas if it was just cutting into a normal print, I wouldn't care as much because, you know, it came that way. The assembly of this dress is pretty simple, although there are some deviations for how we put things together. Usually you would sew the bodice together first and then the skirt separately and then join them at the waist seam. For this dress, you want to join the bodice front and the skirt front together at the waist seam first, followed by the bodice back and the skirt back at the waist seam. So that way you have 2 separate pieces, which you will then join at the shoulder seams after putting down the faux placket. You do sew the placket down by hand, and a trick to make sure that everything's perfectly centered is to just fold the front part of your dress in half and press a harsh seam down the center. That way you can just line it up and hand sew it down. Here is a still shot of just the front of the dress. I'm working on attaching the back bodice and the back skirt right now. I want to touch on some of the construction methods that I use for this garment. I use French seams throughout except for at the waist seams and the shoulder seams. The instructions have you go over it with a seam binding, and then in the end I added a waist stay, which is like an internal belt to help keep some of the tension off of the seams. Once the shoulder seams are attached, then I add on the shoulder facings as well as the neckband facings. And then I go on to just closing up the dress at the side seams, with the right side being completely French seamed and the left side having my zipper. The fabric ended up looking like a toile fabric, which I absolutely adore. That type of fabric kind of looks like old china. It's usually in one solid color with very fine printing. I'll put up a picture of what I mean, and it just looks like a nautical or like seafood version of that, and I think that's so cool because then it adds a little bit of class to an otherwise just whimsical piece. When I couldn't get my hands on the exact fabric like in the inspiration photo, I was a little bit disappointed, just a tiny bit, because I felt like I wasn't going to achieve the look that I wanted. But turns out that this came out way more classy with the amount of like tacky novelty that I love. As the fabric started to come together, I started to get a more clear picture of what I wanted the finished garment to be, which also influenced my decision to go with the straight skirt because I knew I wanted a specific hat and gloves. So I think paired with a bold print and a big skirt, it would have just been too much. Speaking of accessories, that brings me to the cummerbund that was pictured on the pattern art. It was also included as a pattern piece, and I already know I do not like this accessory. It screams pirate, and it only ever looks good on the pattern pictures to me and possibly old magazine ads and things like that. But I've worn them when I was in band, and I've worn them in another vintage pattern, and I just don't love it on me, and I think a wide belt would look way better. Against my better judgment, I went ahead and sewed up the cummerbund anyway, and then realized that I absolutely hated it. And it, with someone who already has like a short waist, it made my waist look even shorter, and it just wasn't doing anything for me. So I decided to go with my wide belt, which I knew would work. Not to mention on me, the cummerbund covered up the soft pleats on the skirt, which I really like, especially for someone like me who has a very straight, narrow figure. Having those soft pleats on the skirt really kind of makes the illusion of having wider hips, so you get that hourglass look, which the cummerbund kind of like swallows up and then makes me look very straight and narrow. After spending 2 weeks embroidering this fabric, it took me about a month to actually cut into it because my nerves were bad. I took ordinary fabric and then made it something that was special. I think this fabric really contributed to my sewing block that I had a couple videos back, because I knew what I wanted to make, but I had so many options and I just couldn't get started. So now that that block has been removed, I am like really trying to catch up, and now my only regret is that I did not sew this sooner because I'm running out of summer and I want to wear this dress out. That being said, I do think I'm ending my summer sewing with a bang, and I am so proud of this dress and all of the work that went into it. It will be hot for at least another month or so, so I will be enjoying this dress offline. Thank you guys so much for watching this video. I truly appreciate all of your support. If you haven't already, please consider liking this video, subscribing, and leaving me a little comment below. I'd love to hear your thoughts. If you would like to support my channel any further, you can leave me a virtual tip over on Ko-Fi or become a bobbin over on Patreon. The bobbins had the pleasure of watching me pick up and put down this fabric for months, and so if you're interested in seeing things ahead of time and seeing what's in my brain, feel free to join us over there. We would absolutely love to have you. This will most likely be the last summer sewing video of 2024, and I had a blast this season. I feel like I've truly narrowed down my personal style, and I can't say that I missed with anything that I made this season. I have so many beautiful fall fabrics and projects planned, and I can't wait to see you in the next one. Until next time, bye!